Okay, so I got a question from the audience. Do you think there is going to be a real inevitable crash, or is it just being projected and also possibly being put off for as long as possible? I think this is an interesting question. Basically, it has three parts, and the answer to all of them is yes, but it's to explain each part. I mean, is there going to be a real inevitable crash? I think there's going to be a crash because as the stock market and particularly popular sections of the stock market like the S&P 500, because that keeps trending upward and it's not connected to the fundamentals. And by the way, this is May 2021 that I'm saying this. So do I think there's going to be a crash? I think there kind of has to be a crash. Honestly, if there's not a crash, that's almost even worse because it means we've lost the ability to price things correctly. Nobody's paying attention to the price. If they just start putting money in because it's going up and it starts going up because they put money in, which is that is actually how the S&P 500 is behaving now because people like Tony Robbins and even Warren Buffett sort of hinted, Tony Robbins actually suggests you invest in it. Warren Buffett hints at the idea that like he would have his wife invest in that if Berkshire Hathaway was not part of the picture. But because, and I'm not saying Warren Buffett doesn't know how to invest, he actually does. He goes through and picks companies very carefully based on their value. But because there's a lot of people who are trying a super passive strategy of just putting money into big companies, that makes the big companies go up in value. And then there becomes a trend of the big companies going up in value, and then people put more in, and then so you've just got this positive feedback loop. It's not based on fundamentals at all, and that kind of thing, it can only go on for so long until you get to a situation where the assets aren't being valued properly. When the assets aren't valued properly, your economy just doesn't work as well. Then you have fundamental inefficiencies, and basically you don't produce goods and services efficiently. But I would say even that's not a really good description because producing goods and services is kind of it's an oversimplified way of saying what an economy needs to do. Uh, there's a superorganism, which is your nation, and the individuals of the superorganism need to survive and progress. Um, if you don't survive, obviously, that's not where you want to be. But even if you survive and you don't progress, ultimately, some other country is going to take all your stuff or conquer you. That's just how it works. I mean, in some sense, I wish that the universe were a kinder place, maybe. And maybe in some weird way, the unkindness is the only thing that keeps it honest, though. Um, so I'd have to think about what I really think on that. This is a situation where like Q would pop out in Star Trek and make my wish come true, but it'd be really bad. So I don't want to say exactly, but um, the way that it works is like there's always somebody that's going to come along. If you don't progress, there's going to be some body, and when I say body, like another superorganism, like another nation, is going to come along and take all your stuff, basically. It could take all your assets, or possibly just take your life along with it. So you have to survive and you have to progress. If you've got all these assets and the prices are not being set in a rational way, it disables the ability, in some sense, of the superorganism to survive and progress. So an example of this would be like, and we've seen it happen with communism, right? Um, take a whole country like Russia, put it under communist control, and because communism removes the market pricing, it messes up the economy so bad that it's just not that efficient, and then it can't progress as fast, and people are struggling just to get food. They don't really have the extra resource to make advancements in technology and the advancements that are needed to keep you like on the board in the game of life, basically. So those countries over time, most countries have realized communism doesn't work and they've switched to something else. But what the United States is doing is approaching communism as the centralized power takes more and more money and starts saying, okay, I'm just going to distribute it how I say I distribute it. That's getting closer and closer to communism. And it's getting closer and closer to a point where rather than the market determining the prices of things like stocks correctly, it's the Fed jumping in and saying, oh, well, stock market's down, so I need to inject a bunch of money into places, and then that money magically kind of shows up back, pushing the prices of things up, stock market again. So, is there going to be a crash? Yes, I think there's going to be one of two crashes. There's either going to be a crash of efficiency and productivity, which could lead to complete loss of our civilization. I mean, I don't want to sound too dramatic here, but that could lead to the loss of a civilization. Or there could be like a drop in the stock market, which would actually be way less painful if somebody would just let it happen, and that would allow these assets to be correctly priced and for our economy to work correctly again. So, the rest of the question, is it being put off? Yeah, it is being put off. That's kind of what the Fed's doing. For as long as possible, yeah, I think they're going to put it off for as long as possible, but eventually something's going to have to give. So that is my response to the question. Thank you for the question. I think it was really interesting.